There is a cold, uncomfortable, brutally honest truth in the psychology of attraction. A truth most men don't learn until they've been betrayed, walked over, or emotionally drained. It is this: women do not respect the man who argues, begs, pleads, or tries to force a connection to stay alive. They respect the man who can walk away peacefully, silently, calmly, and with full control over himself. Not because he's playing games, not because he wants to manipulate, but because he refuses to negotiate his dignity. A woman may like you for your looks, she may enjoy you for your presence, she may desire you for your charisma, but she only respects you for one thing: your ability to walk away when the dynamic no longer honors you. This is the masculine line she cannot cross, the boundary she cannot manipulate, the standard she cannot soften. And when she sees a man hold that line with quiet strength, something in her psychology shifts. She sees discipline, she sees self-worth, she sees emotional independence, she sees a man she cannot control, and therefore a man she cannot forget. Most men destroy their own value in a relationship not because they are weak, but because they are emotionally attached. They chase explanations, they fight for clarity, they argue for respect. They break themselves trying to save something that is slowly killing their confidence. They choose chaos over dignity. They take responsibility for her behavior. They stay when they should leave. And the more they tolerate, the less she respects them, until the attraction disappears, the connection collapses, and she no longer sees him as the man she once admired. But a man who can walk away peacefully, without rage, without bitterness, without emotional collapse, becomes a different presence in her mind. He becomes the man whose silence speaks louder than any speech, the man whose absence weighs more heavily than his presence ever did, the man who refused to fight for someone who refused to fight for him. And that decision, that calm, dignified withdrawal, becomes the moment she realizes she underestimated him. Women are not wired to respect a man they can emotionally control. They respect the man who chooses his peace over their unpredictability. They respect the man who refuses to break himself for a relationship that stopped honoring him. They respect the man who stands on his standards without shaking, who values himself more than the temporary comfort of being chosen, who understands that leaving peacefully is not a loss. It is a declaration of strength. Women only respect the man who refuses to chase what disrespects him. And they only rethink the man who left when he should have stayed gone. Because that man proves he is governed by purpose, not emotion. By direction, not dependency. By self-worth, not fear. In today's video, you're going to learn exactly why peaceful detachment is the strongest masculine power a man can hold. Why women only chase the man who can walk away without hesitation. And why the cold truth is this: she doesn't respect the man who stays. She respects the man who will leave. Before we start, a quick reminder. The real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube. It happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course, it's a brotherhood, a private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month, you join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits, just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below. Join the community. Enroll once. Grow forever. Let's dive in. Section number 1. The masculine power of peaceful detachment. The first and most fundamental truth a man must understand is that peaceful detachment is not weakness. It is masculine power in its purest form. Women do not respect the man who reacts emotionally to their distance, their attitude, their tests, or their inconsistency. They respect the man who stays grounded while everything around him is shaking. They respect the man who does not attach his identity to being chosen. They respect the man who can love a woman deeply, but still walk away the moment the connection starts costing him his integrity. Men make their biggest mistakes not when they give love, but when they give emotional control. They bend to avoid conflict. They argue to prove their worth. They chase to feel validated. They hold on tighter the moment she begins to pull away, thinking that persistence will fix her behavior or restore her interest. But the more they fight, the more she loses respect. Because fighting for a woman who is not fighting for you signals emotional dependency, not emotional strength. Peaceful detachment is the opposite. It is not silence born from anger. It is silence born from self-respect. It is the calmness of a man who understands that love is not something to be begged for, argued for, or forced into existence. It is the stillness of a man who knows that connection cannot be maintained through panic. It is the discipline to step back the moment a woman begins to treat you in ways you wouldn't treat yourself. And that discipline hits her harder than any emotional outburst ever could. Women are biologically wired to test men's emotional boundaries, not because they are manipulative, but because feminine energy seeks a masculine anchor. When she raises her voice, she wants to know if your emotions will rise with hers. When she becomes uncertain, she wants to know if you will become uncertain too. When she gives less effort, she wants to see if you will overcompensate. These tests are not conscious strategies. They are instinctual calibrations of your masculine capacity. A man who reacts emotionally fails every test. A man who stays calm passes every one. Peaceful detachment shows her something she rarely encounters: a man who cannot be controlled through emotional volatility. When you do not chase, when you do not argue, when you do not beg for understanding, when you do not panic in response to her distance, you communicate something she deeply respects. You are the leader of your emotional world, not her behavior. She may try to provoke a reaction, but your calmness becomes the unexpected answer she wasn't prepared for. She may pull away expecting you to chase, but your stillness becomes the mirror that makes her confront her own behavior. She may create distance believing it will increase her power, but your peaceful detachment becomes the boundary that returns the power to where it belongs: with you. Men do not attract respect by fighting for emotional closeness. They attract respect by protecting their emotional center. When you stop fighting to be chosen, she starts evaluating whether she is worthy of staying in your life. And that reversal, that shift in emotional leverage, begins the process of genuine female respect. Section number 2. The boundary of silence. One of the greatest misunderstandings men have about women is the belief that loud reactions create clarity. They think that explaining, debating, confronting, or emotionally defending themselves will somehow make her change, understand or appreciate the relationship. But in reality, women rarely hear men through noise. They hear men through silence, the calm, grounded silence of a man who refuses to participate in drama or emotional chaos. This silence is not withdrawal. It is elevation. It is not passive. It is intentional. It is the moment a man stops giving her the emotional reactions that allowed her to avoid accountability. When a woman pulls away, acts cold, becomes inconsistent, or treats you with casual disrespect, she is not expecting silence. She is expecting pressure. She is expecting questions. She is expecting pursuit. She is expecting you to react in ways that reinforce her belief that she can control the emotional tempo of the relationship. She expects your behavior to rise in intensity the moment hers drops. And when it doesn't, when you remain calm, quiet, and emotionally neutral, the entire psychological dynamic shifts. Your silence forces her to feel what she was avoiding. It forces her to confront the discomfort she thought she could ignore. It forces her to realize that distance is not a tool to weaken you. It is a tool that ends up weakening her position if you choose not to chase. Silence becomes the mirror she has to look into, and for the first time, she sees the emotional imbalance she created. This reflection can be unsettling because she thought she had time, she thought she had leverage, she thought she had control. Your silence shows her she had none of the three. A man's silence is not emptiness. It is consequence. It is the moment where your energy stops flowing toward her and begins flowing back into yourself. Women respect the man who does not reward bad behavior with attention. They respect the man who refuses to explain his worth, They respect the man who allows his absence to say what his voice no longer needs to say. Silence is the language of self-respect, and women hear it loudly. When you stop reacting, you remove her ability to shift blame onto your tone or your emotions. She can no longer say you're dramatic. She can no longer say you're overreacting. She can no longer say you're the problem. Your stillness exposes the truth she tried to bury beneath conflict. And faced with that truth, she must now decide whether to rise, reflect, repair, or walk away. But this time, she knows the cost of walking away is not your panic. It's your indifference. Your silence also breaks her patterns. If she's used to being chased, your calmness resets the entire emotional landscape. If she's used to exerting power through withdrawal, your silence makes her strategy ineffective. If she's used to watching you react, your neutrality becomes the signal that you have reclaimed your emotional leadership. And nothing commands more respect than the man who refuses to be emotionally pulled off his center. The man who can remain silent is not weak. He is dangerous, because silence is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of mastery. And mastery is the one thing women respect more than desire, more than charm, and far more than effort. Section number 3. The power of non-reactivity. One of the most important realities men must understand is that women test men emotionally not to destroy them, but to measure the depth of their stability. These tests are rarely conscious. She isn't intentionally trying to provoke you or unsettle you. But feminine energy naturally seeks a masculine presence, strong enough to hold emotional ground without collapsing, panicking, or losing himself in the process. When she senses weakness in your reactions, her respect declines quietly. When she senses strength in your stability, her respect grows uncontrollably. Non-reactivity is not coldness. It is not indifference. And it is not emotional detachment. Non-reactivity is emotional leadership. The ability to respond instead of react, to hold your center instead of letting her pull you off balance, to remain steady even when she becomes chaotic, uncertain, distant, or emotionally volatile. This strength is extremely rare. Most men either explode or implode. They either react with anger, frustration, or defensiveness, or they collapse into neediness, over-explaining, panic, or self-blame. Both of these reactions erode her respect instantly. But the man who remains calm, the man who observes without absorbing, who listens without losing himself, who responds without emotional chaos, becomes the one she looks at differently. His presence feels different. His energy feels different. His masculinity feels different. Because he is not controlled by her emotional storms. His calmness calms the storm. When a woman tests your emotional boundaries, by pulling back, by giving mixed signals, by becoming cold, by challenging your tone, by questioning your intentions, by withdrawing affection, she is not looking for perfection. She is looking for stability. A man who passes these tests does so, not because he always knows what to say, but because he never lets her behavior dictate his emotional state. He stays grounded, regardless of the situation. This boundary is what separates the man she respects from the man she outgrows. When you do not react, you strip away her ability to control the direction of the dynamic. She realizes she cannot destabilize you. She realizes she cannot provoke you into emotional chaos. She realizes you are the emotional anchor, not her, not the situation, not the mood of the moment. And this realization awakens both respect and attraction at the deepest level. Non-reactivity also forces her to face her own behavior. When you do not rise to her emotional spikes, she becomes more aware of them. When you do not argue, she becomes more aware of how unnecessary the argument was. When you do not beg for reassurance, she becomes more aware of what she hasn't been giving. Your calmness becomes a mirror, one that exposes the truth more clearly than any confrontation ever could. This boundary also protects you from manipulation. A man who reacts impulsively is easy to manipulate. A man who remains steady is impossible to throw off his path. Women instinctively respect the man whose emotions are not up for sale. His confidence doesn't rise when she is warm, and it doesn't fall when she is cold. His identity doesn't shift based on her attention. His mood doesn't collapse based on her silence. He is self-governed, not externally controlled. And here is the cold truth. A woman cannot respect a man she can emotionally destabilize. She deeply respects the man she cannot move off his center. Non-reactivity is not emotional distance. It is emotional mastery. And mastery is the foundation of masculine respect. Section number 4. The boundary of self-possession. One of the most defining qualities of a man women deeply respect is self-possession. The ability to remain rooted in who you are, what you value, and what you stand for, regardless of how much you desire her or how intensely the relationship feels. Women do not respect men who abandon themselves for the sake of connection. They do not respect men who lose their identity the moment they fall in love. They do not respect men who overgive, over-explain, or over-invest to gain approval. A man becomes respected when he demonstrates that his life, purpose, and emotional stability belong to him first. Self-possession means you are emotionally anchored. Your confidence doesn't depend on her moods. Your identity doesn't depend on her approval. Your happiness doesn't depend on her presence. You are not searching for yourself in her. You are not molding your personality to fit her preferences. You are not shifting your values to avoid conflict. You are not bending your boundaries because you're afraid of losing her. Instead, you stand firm, grounded, and deeply connected to your own direction. A woman respects the man who can love her without losing himself. This is the masculine polarity she craves. Not dominance, but self-mastery. Not control over her, but control over yourself. When she sees that you remain stable, even when she is emotional, disciplined, even when the connection is intoxicating, and purposeful, even when the relationship feels consuming, she feels something she rarely feels: admiration. Admiration is the seed of respect, and respect is the foundation of desire. Most men lose respect not because they fail, but because they drift. They drift into neediness. They drift into over-accommodation. They drift into emotional dependence. They drift into making her the center of their world. They drift into prioritizing her comfort over their own direction. And when a man drifts, a woman feels it instantly. She loses trust. She loses respect. And eventually, she loses attraction. But the man who is self-possessed becomes a different presence entirely. His energy feels stable. His decisions feel intentional. His boundaries feel firm. He does not get lost in her. He does not trade his purpose for her approval. He does not soften his edges to avoid discomfort. He does not surrender his identity in the name of closeness. This is the man she sees as irreplaceable, because his strength comes from within, not from her validation. Self-possession also protects you from emotional chaos. When you are connected to your mission, when your life has structure, and when your identity is grounded, you cannot be controlled by emotional highs or lows. You don't collapse when she pulls away. You don't overreact when she tests you. You don't fall apart when the dynamic shifts. You remain the same man, steady, directed, and composed. And here's the cold psychological truth. A woman cannot respect a man she can consume. She cannot admire a man who gives himself up. She cannot chase a man who chases her more than he chases his purpose. But she will respect, deeply, the man she cannot shake, the man who belongs to himself first, the man who chooses his path before he chooses approval, the man who holds on to his identity even while holding her hand. Self-possession makes you the rarest kind of man, the one she wants, the one she respects, and the one she realizes she cannot replace. Section number 5. The calm. Goodbye. There is a kind of goodbye that hits a woman differently. Not the angry goodbye, not the emotional breakdown, not the dramatic exit filled with accusations or desperation, but the calm, peaceful, grounded goodbye of a man who refuses to lose his dignity. This goodbye has no raised voice, no pleading, no chasing, no attempts to make her feel guilty. It is quiet, it is steady, it is final. and that stillness cuts deeper than anything loud ever could. A calm goodbye is not an act of coldness. It is an act of clarity. It is the moment a man realizes that staying would require him to abandon himself, and he is no longer willing to do that. It is the moment he stops negotiating his worth. It is the moment he stops giving chances to someone who has shown patterns, not promises. It is the moment he steps away not out of anger, but out of self-respect. And women feel this difference in their bones. When a woman loses a man to chaos, she blames the chaos. When she loses him to anger, she blames the argument. When she loses him to emotional explosions, she blames the moment. But when she loses him to calmness, when he leaves silently, without cruelty, without punishment, without trying to make her feel regret, she is forced to face the truth directly. He didn't leave out of impulse. He left because he reached clarity. A calm goodbye removes her ability to rewrite the story. She cannot paint you as unstable because your actions were controlled. She cannot call you reactive because your silence was intentional. She cannot frame you as the emotional one because you left with composure. Instead, she is left sitting with the very questions she never thought she'd have to ask. What did I do? What did I overlook? What did he finally understand that I ignored? Why didn't he fight for me like before? Your peaceful exit becomes the emotional mirror she never wanted to face. It strips away every excuse she used to comfort herself. It exposes the imbalance she contributed to. It makes her aware of how far she pushed you without noticing. And because you didn't leave with anger, she can't hide behind self-defense. She must confront the truth that she lost a man who would have stayed if she had chosen the relationship with equal effort. A calm goodbye also creates a powerful psychological imprint. She may forget the arguments, but she never forgets the man who walked away with dignity. That moment becomes a reference point in her mind. The moment she realized that you were not a man who needed her validation to maintain his identity. You were not a man who clung to the relationship out of fear. You were not a man who would drown yourself to keep her comfortable. You were a man who could choose himself over emotional instability. This is why women respect the calm goodbye more than any speech, more than any pleading, more than any proof of love. Because the calm goodbye is the boundary that says, I gave you my effort, I gave you my honesty, I gave you my presence, but I will not give you my sanity. And here's the deeper truth. A man who can walk away peacefully is a man who cannot be controlled, manipulated, or underestimated. He becomes the man she rethinks, the man she remembers, and the man she respects, even long after he's gone. Lastly, everything you've learned in this video leads to one undeniable truth. A woman's respect is not earned by how hard you fight for her. It is earned by how firmly you stand for yourself. Women may enjoy attention, they may appreciate affection, they may even fall for men who pursue them, but they only truly respect the man who refuses to stay in any situation that diminishes his identity. They respect the man who loves deeply but never abandons himself. They respect the man who can care without chasing, who can feel without collapsing, who can commit without losing his independence. But most importantly, they respect the man who can leave peacefully when the relationship stops honoring him. A peaceful exit is not a moment of defeat. It is a moment of masculine sovereignty. It is the point where your self-worth becomes louder than your desires. It is the point where your boundaries become real, not just spoken. It is the point where you choose your future over temporary emotion. And women sense that shift instantly. They feel it in their core. They recognize that this is not the behavior of a desperate man. It is the behavior of a man who knows his value. When you walk away peacefully, you teach her something about you and something about herself. She learns that you are not afraid of being alone. She learns that you do not negotiate with disrespect. She learns that you do not cling to relationships that drain you. She learns that your respect for yourself outweighs your fear of losing her. And she learns that you are a man capable of protecting your life, your mind, and your emotional world, even from her, if necessary. But she also learns something about her own behavior. When you don't argue, she sees the argument clearly. When you don't react, she sees her actions fully. When you don't chase, she notices the imbalance she created. Your peaceful departure becomes the mirror that reveals the truth she tried to avoid. And that truth is often what changes her, because a woman confronted by a man's dignity is a woman who must examine her own. Men who leave emotionally, loudly, or violently are forgettable. Men who leave calmly, silently, and decisively become unforgettable. They become the men a woman replays in her mind years after the breakup, the men she compares others to, the men she regrets losing, the men she realizes she should have respected sooner. This is not because he was perfect, but because he showed strength at the exact moment she expected weakness. So here is the final cold truth. A woman may love many men, desire a few men, entertain countless men, but she only respects the man who can walk away in peace. Because that man shows emotional maturity. That man shows discipline. That man shows boundaries. That man shows leadership. That man shows his life does not revolve around her approval. And that is the man she cannot replace. In the end, peaceful detachment is not about losing her. It is about never losing yourself again. And the man who refuses to lose himself becomes the man every woman respects, even long after he's gone. Remember, knowledge means nothing without action. If you're ready to rise above emotion and lead with purpose, join the community today at the link below. Enroll once, grow forever.